If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, get a job. My son screamed at me. I did not answer. I closed my suitcase and walked out without looking back. Dad. Where are you going with that suitcase? He yelled behind me, but I kept walking. At that exact moment, a luxury car pulled up in front of my door, and my new rich wife stepped out. If this story stirs something inside you, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories. Every day I share real stories about people like you and me. Tell us where you are watching from. My name is William Parker. I am 71 years old, and 3 days ago I closed a suitcase. I left my son's house and never looked back. It was not easy. It was not quick. It was the result of months of small humiliations, of silences that screamed louder than any insult, of looks that told me the same thing every day. You are extra here. You do not belong. But there was an exact moment when everything broke. A scream. A sentence. 6 words that erased 50 years of fatherhood as if they were dust on the ground. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, get a job. My son said it, looking me in the eye, without blinking, without regret. And I, in that moment, knew that I no longer had a son. That morning started like all the others in the last few months. I woke up before dawn, as always. In that house, I could not sleep. Not because the mattress was bad, but because every night I fell asleep, feeling that I was in the way, that my breathing was annoying, that my existence was a burden to everyone. I got dressed in silence in that 6-by-6-foot room, the one they gave me when I came to live with them. It is temporary, Dad Michael had told me, until you get settled. 8 months have passed, 8 months sleeping in a room that smells of damp, with a window facing a gray wall, listening every night to the whispers of Michael and Sarah in their room, planning how to get rid of me. I went down to the kitchen without making a sound. My steps were like a ghost. I'd learned to walk without the floorboards creaking, to open the bathroom door without the hinge squeaking, to exist without bothering anyone. But that morning when I got to the kitchen, Michael was already there, sitting at the table wearing his blue tie, the one I gave him 3 years ago when he got promoted at work. He was drinking coffee, looking at his phone. When he saw me enter, his face twisted, as if my presence ruined his breakfast. "Good morning," I said to him. He did not answer. He just let out a long sigh, one of those that say everything without saying anything, and I felt my chest tighten. I poured my coffee into an old mug, one of those that Sarah no longer uses because she says they do not match the new kitchen. I sat at the edge of the table, as far away from Michael as possible, trying not to take up much space, not to breathe too loudly, not to exist too much. The silence was heavy, thick, like when you know a storm is going to break, but it has not rained yet. Michael kept looking at his phone, typing furiously, ignoring me completely. I drank my coffee slowly, burning my lips, feeling every sip go down like lead to my stomach. Then I heard Sarah's footsteps coming down the stairs, and I knew the storm was about to begin. Sarah entered the kitchen in that floral robe she wears in the mornings, her hair tied in a tight bun, her face serious. She looked at me and did not say hello. She just went straight to the sink. She turned on the faucet harder than necessary and started washing dishes that were already clean. I knew that technique. I had seen it dozens of times. It was her way of saying I'm upset and it is your fault without opening her mouth. Michael looked up from his phone. He looked at Sarah. Then he looked at me. And there I knew that this was no coincidence. This was planned. The two of them had already talked before I came down. They had already decided what they were going to tell me, and I was about to hear it. Dad Michael said, leaving the phone on the table. His voice was cold, like when he talks to employees in his office. "We have to talk." I squeezed the mug between my hands. I felt the heat burning my fingers, but I did not let go. About what I asked, although I already knew. Michael ran his hand over his face as if he were tired of me, before starting the conversation. "About this," he said, signaling with his hand the whole kitchen, the house, my entire life reduced to a gesture. about this situation. It cannot go on like this. Sarah turned off the faucet. She turned around. She crossed her arms. And I felt like an accused man waiting for sentencing. Michael, I tried to speak, but he raised his hand to silence me. The way you silence a child. The way you silence someone who has no right to defend themselves. No, Dad, let me speak first. He leaned forward, rested his elbows on the table. He looked at me with those eyes that once looked at me with love, and now only showed exhaustion. I work 10 hours a day. Sarah works too. We pay for this house. We pay for the food. We pay for everything. And you just spend your time walking around, in the library, walking around out there as if you were on vacation. Do you know what it costs to support you? Every word was a stab, not because they were lies, but because they came from my son, from my blood. Sarah spoke then, and her voice was even worse because it did not have a drop of guilt. William, we understand that you are grieving. Your wife died 2 years ago, we know. It was a terrible blow, a massive heart attack. Nobody expected it. But time has passed. 2 years. You have to move on. You cannot keep living in the past and expecting us to support you forever. Support. That word again. As if I hadn't worked 40 years in a textile factory. As if I hadn't paid for Michael's education. As if I hadn't sold my car to pay for his hospital bills when he had pneumonia at 6 years old. As if all that didn't count. As if I were a stranger begging for charity. I was going to answer. I had the words stuck in my throat, burning me, wanting to come out. But Michael kept talking, and every word was a hammer. Dad, you are 71 years old, but you are still healthy. You can work. There are jobs for people your age. Security in stores, gardening, whatever. But you cannot stay here all day waiting for us to solve your life. We have our own expenses, our plans. We want to remodel the kitchen. Sarah wants to travel to Hawaii in December, and we can't if we are paying for everything of yours. Hawaii. They wanted to go to Hawaii, and I was the obstacle. I who changed his diapers, who carried him on my shoulders, who slept in hospital chairs, watching over his sleep. Then Michael said what he had come to say from the beginning. He leaned closer, as if so his words would reach me very clearly, very deep, right inside my soul. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, get a job. He said it slowly. He said it looking me in the eyes. He said it without trembling. And in that moment, something inside me turned off. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was something worse. It was acceptance. It was understanding that the son I had raised, the boy who hugged me on stormy nights, the young man who cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend left him, that son no longer existed. In front of me was a stranger, a man who saw me as a problem, as garbage, as something that had to be taken out of the house. I tried to speak then, because there was something they seemed to conveniently forget. Michael, I receive my pension. It is not much, but it is $1,000 a month, and I give them all to you. Every dollar. I don't keep anything. It was true. Every month when my pension arrived from the textile factory where I worked 40 years, I handed the full money to Michael. For the house expenses, I told him. He took it without thanking me as if it were his right. But Sarah scoffed when I said that, as if my $1,000 were an offense. William, $1,000 doesn't even cover the electricity and water, not to mention the food. Do you know how much you alone spend on blood pressure medicine? Michael nodded. Dad, that $1,000 is nothing. Nothing. That is why we tell you to get a job, so you can contribute more, so you can really help. 40 years of work, a pension that left me without a dime in my pocket, and still it wasn't enough. I didn't say anything. I got up slowly. I left the mug in the sink and went up the stairs. I heard Sarah whisper something to Michael, but I didn't want to hear what. I went into my room, that room that smelled of defeat, and I took the suitcase out of the closet. The same suitcase I arrived with 8 months ago, when I still had hope that my son loved me. I started packing my clothes, my few books, the photo of my wife that I keep on the nightstand. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were trembling with freedom, because in that moment, I understood something I should have understood months ago. I didn't have to stay where I wasn't wanted. And although I didn't know where I was going to go, I knew that any place was better than this. While I folded my clothes and put them in the suitcase, the memories hit me like waves. I couldn't help it. I saw Michael in every garment I touched. I saw the boy he was, the son I loved with every cell of my body. And I asked myself over and over again, at what moment did everything break? At what moment did I stop being his hero to become his burden? I closed my eyes and went back to that day 42 years ago, when Michael was 6 years old and was about to die. That day when I would have given my life for him without hesitation. That day when he told me he loved me more than anything in the world. It was in winter, a brutal winter of those that freeze you to the bones. Michael had been running a fever for 3 days. At first, my wife and I thought it was a common cold. We gave him syrup. We tucked him in. We took care of him. But the fever didn't go down. On the 3rd day, Michael started to hallucinate. He said things without sense. He cried. He shook. My wife came into the room where I was reading the newspaper and told me with a broken voice, "William, something is wrong. Very wrong." We ran to the county hospital. They told us he had pneumonia, severe pneumonia, that he needed immediate hospitalization, and that if he didn't improve in 24 hours, things would get critical. They admitted him that same night. They connected him to IVs, to oxygen, to machines that beeped every 5 seconds. My wife cried nonstop, holding onto my arm, praying in a low voice. I couldn't cry. I had to be strong. Someone had to be. The doctors told us the public hospital was saturated, that they didn't have enough medicines, that we could wait days for them to run the necessary tests. But if you take him to a private clinic, one of the nurses said in a low voice, there they will attend to him quickly. With the right treatment, he will be saved. My wife looked at me, and I knew what I had to do. That early morning, I left the hospital and went straight to the house. I grabbed the papers of my car, a blue sedan I had bought 2 years before with my savings. That car was my pride. I washed it every Sunday. I took care of it as if it were my second child, but in that moment, I didn't care. I called an acquaintance who bought used cars. I told him I needed to sell urgently. "How much will you give me right now?" I asked him. He haggled. He offered me half of what the car was worth. I accepted. There was no time. With that money in my hand, I went back to the hospital. I told my wife pack his things. We were going to the private clinic. At the clinic, everything was different. A clean room, with big windows, with light, doctors who checked Michael immediately, who gave him new medicines, who ran tests in less than 2 hours. My wife sat next to Michael's bed. She stroked his hair. She sang him lullabies. I stayed standing by the window, looking at the street, thinking about the car I had just sold. In the years it was going to cost me to buy another one, but I didn't regret it, not for a second, because in that bed was my son, my whole world, and there was no price I wouldn't pay to save him. Michael spent 5 days in that clinic, 5 days in which I slept in a plastic chair next to his bed, without changing my clothes, eating what my wife brought me from home, without separating myself from him. The doctor said he was improving, but I didn't relax until I saw his eyes open, until I heard his voice. The 3rd night Michael woke up. He looked at me with those big dark eyes, still full of fever, and he said to me with a weak voice, "Dad, are you here? Always, son." I answered him, and I grabbed his hand. He smiled and went back to sleep. I stayed there, with his hand in mine, crying in silence for the first time in 3 days. When they finally discharged him, Michael walked out slowly, still weak, but alive. We took him home. My wife prepared his favorite food, chicken soup with noodles. I helped him up the stairs. I put him in his bed. I put his favorite blankets on him. He hugged me tight. with those skinny sick boy arms, and he said in my ear, "Thank you, Dad. When I grow up, I am going to take care of you always. Always. I promise you." I kissed his forehead. "You don't have to promise me anything, son. I take care of you because I love you. Period." But he insisted. "No, Dad, I promise you. I will never leave you alone." I believed him. I kept that promise in my heart, as if it were a treasure. The following years were hard economically. Without a car, I had to take 2 buses to get to work. I left home at 5 in the morning and returned at 8 at night. But I didn't complain. I worked overtime whenever I could. I saved every dollar so Michael could have the best. When he turned 8, I bought him a new red bicycle with lights on the wheels. Michael screamed with happiness. He hugged me. He told me I was the best dad in the world. When he turned 12, I paid for swimming lessons at the sports club, even though that meant I ate less, so the money would reach. I saw him win his first medal in a school competition. I cried with pride in the stands. When Michael entered high school, I was already almost 50 years old. My knees were starting to hurt from the work in the factory. My back creaked every morning, but I kept working. I kept paying, because I wanted Michael to have what I never had, an education, an opportunity, a better future. I enrolled him in a private school, one of those expensive ones, where the other parents arrived in new cars and I arrived by bus. But I didn't care. Michael got good grades. Michael was smart. Michael was going to be someone in life, and every sacrifice was worth it, every extra hour. Every plate of food I stopped eating so he could eat better. When he finished high school, Michael hugged me on his graduation day. He was wearing his blue gown, his cap, his diploma in his hand. I was standing next to my wife, both of us crying with pride, watching our son become a man. Michael approached. He hugged us both, and he told me, "Dad, all this is thanks to you. Thanks for every sacrifice. For every dollar you spent on me. I will never forget it. And when I start working, I am going to pay you back everything. Everything." I told him he owed me nothing. That being his father was the greatest honor of my life. He smiled. "I am going to pay you back anyway, Dad. You'll see." And I believed him. Again. Because you always believe your children. But the promises of children are like smoke. Beautiful while they last, and then they disappear into the air. Michael grew up. He went to college. He met Sarah. He got a job. He got married. He had children. And little by little, without me realizing it, he stopped calling me. He stopped visiting me. He stopped remembering me. Until my wife died 2 years ago. A massive heart attack in the kitchen of our house. She fell to the floor and never woke up. Then Michael came back, not because he missed me, but because I no longer had anyone to take care of me. And there, standing in front of that suitcase, I was packing. I understood the most painful truth of all. A son's promises of love last only as long as that son needs you. When you are the one in need, the promises are forgotten. My wife's name was Mary. Mary Parker. She was 68 years old when she died. 68 years of kindness, of laughter, of coffee in the mornings and soap operas in the afternoons. She died 2 years ago on a random Tuesday in April, while she was preparing lunch. I was in the living room reading the newspaper. I heard a dry thud in the kitchen. I thought she had dropped a pot. "Are you okay, honey?" I shouted. There was no answer. I got up. I went to the kitchen, and I saw her there, lying on the floor, with her eyes open, looking at the ceiling, her hand clutching her chest. Massive heart attack, the doctor said. She didn't suffer. That was the only good thing. She didn't suffer. Michael arrived at the hospital 2 hours later. I was sitting on a metal chair, staring at the wall, without tears because I still couldn't believe it. Michael came running in, with Sarah behind him, both dressed for work, as if they had come out of an important meeting. He hugged me. "Dad, I am so sorry," he told me. And he cried. He cried on my shoulder like when he was a boy. I stroked his back. "It's over, son. It's over." The three of us stayed there in that cold hospital hallway, crying for the woman who had given us everything, for the wife I loved for 46 years, for the mother Michael never valued enough until she was gone. The funeral was on Thursday, a small ceremony, simple, as Mary would have wanted. Michael paid for everything, the casket, the flowers, the service. He didn't let me pay for anything. I'll handle it, Dad. You don't worry. I thanked him. I thought my son was being generous, that he was taking care of me in my pain. But months later, during an argument, Sarah threw it in my face. We paid for your wife's funeral, William. $5,000, and you haven't even thanked us. There I understood that it hadn't been generosity. It had been an investment, a favor that one day they were going to collect. The first months after Mary's death were the darkest of my life. I woke up in the early mornings looking for her in bed, feeling the empty space beside me, smelling her pillow, which no longer smelled like her. The house was full of her things, her coffee mug with painted flowers, her shawl hanging on the rack, her slippers by the door. I couldn't throw anything away. Every object was a piece of her. Michael called me sometimes. "How are you, Dad?" I lied. "Fine, son, getting by." But I wasn't fine. I was dying of loneliness. I was sinking into a bottomless pit, and no one extended a hand. Michael started visiting me on Sundays. At first he came with Sarah and the kids. They brought food. We spent the afternoon together. They kept me company. I clung to those Sundays like a castaway to a life preserver. But over time, the visits became shorter. They arrived at 2, left at 4. Then they arrived at 3, left at 4:30. Sarah always had an excuse. "The kids have homework. I have to get up early tomorrow. There's a lot of traffic." Michael nodded, and I stayed alone again, watching them drive away down the street, feeling that every visit was more out of obligation than love. The phone calls also changed. Before, Michael called me 2 or 3 times a week. We talked about everything, about his work, about the kids, about life. But after the first year, the calls became more spaced out, once a week, then every 2 weeks, and when he called, the conversations were short, cold, as if he were checking a box on a to-do list. "Hi, Dad. How are you?" "Oh, that's good. Listen, I have a call coming in. I'll call you later." And he didn't call later. I stayed with the phone in my hand, waiting like a fool for it to ring. But it didn't ring. One day I called Michael crying. It was my 70th birthday. Nobody had called me. Nobody had visited me. I spent the whole day alone looking out the window, waiting for someone to remember me. At 8 at night, I couldn't take it anymore. I dialed his number. "Son, today is my birthday," I told him with a broken voice. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "Oh, Dad, sorry, I completely forgot. I've had a lot of work. But happy birthday. Okay, I'll bring you something tomorrow." He didn't bring me anything tomorrow, or the day after, or ever. And I realized that my birthday didn't matter anymore, that I didn't matter anymore. 6 months after Mary's death, Michael made me the proposal. He arrived one Sunday, without Sarah, without the kids, alone. He sat in the living room, serious, with his hands together. "Dad, you can't keep living alone. This house is too big for you, and it hurts you to be here, with all of Mom's memories." I looked at him without understanding. "What do you propose?" I asked him. "That you come live with us? We have a spare room. It's not very big, but it's comfortable. That way you won't be alone, and we will take care of you." I felt an immense hope. "Really, son?" He nodded. "Really, Dad? You are my father. It is my duty to take care of you." And I believed him. Again. I always believed him. I sold the house where I lived with Mary for 42 years. The house where we raised Michael, where we celebrated Christmases, where we cried and laughed and lived. Michael helped me with the paperwork. "It is better this way, Dad. With the money from the sale, you can be calm, have savings. The house sold for $200,000. I gave half to Michael. So you can remodel your house, son, so you are comfortable." He hugged me. "Thanks, Dad. You are very generous." The other 100,000 I left in the bank, in a savings account. For emergencies, I told Michael. For the future. But Sarah, when she found out, looked at me differently, as if those 100,000 were already hers, as if it were only a matter of time to inherit them. And I naive didn't understand that look until much later. The first days at Michael's house were strange. I tried to help with everything. Wash the dishes, sweep, cook. But Sarah stopped me. No, William. That's not how you wash dishes. Let me do it. No, William. That's not how you sweep. You rest. At first I thought it was kindness. Then I understood it was control. That they didn't want me to touch anything. Because everything was theirs. Because I was a guest who was in the way. The grandchildren, Sam and Lily. At first they hugged me. Grandpa, it's so good you live here. But little by little they stopped touching me. Sarah told them, don't bother Grandpa. He is tired. And they moved away. And I stayed alone in that small room, wondering at what moment everything started to go wrong. In the 3rd month, Michael told me something that broke me. We were having breakfast, just him and me, because Sarah had left early for work. Dad, I need to ask you something. I left my bread. Tell me, son. He didn't look me in the eye. Your pension. The $1,000 you receive. I need you to give them to me completely every month to help with the house expenses. I nodded. Of course, son. No problem. And since that month, I didn't have a single dollar in my pocket. Every month, I handed him my full pension. And every month, Sarah complained. It's not enough, William. It's not enough. And I asked myself, if my money is not enough, why did they bring me here? Then I understood the truth. They didn't bring me for love. They brought me because I am an obligation, a burden, a problem they don't know how to solve. I had been living with Michael and Sarah for 4 months when I heard those words. Words that stuck in me like knives, and that still, when I remember them, hurt me more than any direct insult. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in my room, reading, trying not to bother, not to exist too much. But the walls of that house are thin. And when Sarah started talking in the kitchen with Michael, her voice reached my room clearly. It smells like old man here, she said. Like medicine. Like mothballs. Like those things old people use. I can't invite my friends like this. I am embarrassed. I froze on the bed, with the book open on my lap, unable to move a muscle. I waited for Michael's response. I waited for him to defend me, to tell her, Sarah, he is my father. Don't talk like that about him. But he didn't say that. What he said was worse. I know. I have noticed it too. I am going to talk to him about the ventilation of his room, and about him showering more often. I showered every day. Every day. But for Sarah, that wasn't enough. I smelled old. I was the problem. My very existence contaminated her perfect house. That afternoon, I went out without saying anything. I walked to a pharmacy and bought air fresheners. 5 different types. Lavender, pine, citrus, flowers, ocean. I spent $50 of the money I had kept from the sale of my house. Money I kept hidden in my suitcase for emergencies. I went back home and sprayed my entire room with the air fresheners. I opened the window, even though it was cold. I showered again. I put on clean clothes. I put cologne on my neck, on my wrists, behind my ears. I smelled like a perfume shop, but I didn't care. What mattered was not being an embarrassment, not smelling old, not being a problem. Sarah never mentioned the air fresheners. She never said thank you or how considerate. She simply went on with her life as if I didn't exist. But she started doing other things, small things that made me feel like I didn't belong. She moved the living room furniture. It's to make better use of the space, she said. My favorite armchair, the one where I sat to watch the news in the afternoons, disappeared. She replaced it with a coffee table with plastic flowers. I asked where my armchair was. I donated it, William. It was already very old. Besides, now the living room looks more modern, without me. The grandchildren also changed. Sam, the oldest. He was 12 years old. At first, he looked for me to help him with his math homework. I was good at math. In the factory where I worked, I was in charge of calculating fabric measurements, costs, everything. But one day when I went to his room to help him, he told me, "No, Grandpa. Mom says I better look for tutorials on YouTube. That your methods are very ancient. I, who had taught him to count, who had taught him to add. Now I was too ancient to teach him anything. Lily, the youngest. She was 7 years old. She was my favorite. She hugged me. She asked me to tell her stories before sleeping. But one day after hugging me, she wrinkled her nose. 'Grandpa, you smell weird,' she told me. Sarah was nearby. She heard. And instead of scolding Lily for being rude, she told her, 'Yes, my love. Grandpa is already old. Grandpas smell different. But it's normal.' And from that day on, Lily stopped hugging me. She greeted me from afar, with her hand, but she didn't get close. I died inside every time I saw her, because it wasn't just that she rejected me, it was that she had been taught to reject me. One night, Michael asked me to eat earlier. 'Dad, some friends from work are coming to dinner, and I would prefer if you had already eaten, so you don't feel uncomfortable.' I looked at him without understanding. 'Uncomfortable, son? They are your friends. It doesn't bother me to be there.' He ran his hand over his face, nervous. 'No, Dad, it's just that it's a business dinner. And well, you know, they are boring conversations. Better you eat quietly at 6, and they arrive at 8. What he was really telling me was, I don't want you there. I don't want them to see you. You are an embarrassment.' I ate alone in my room that night. I heard the guests' laughter from the living room, and I cried with every bite. But the biggest humiliation came on a Sunday. Sarah organized a family meal with her parents, her brothers, her nephews. I thought they were going to include me. I dressed up nicely. I put on my blue shirt, the one Mary gave me years ago. I went down to the living room. Everyone was there, sitting, talking, laughing. I said hello. 'Good afternoon.' Some answered with a nod. Others didn't even look at me. I sat in a corner of the sofa. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody asked me how I was. I was invisible, a ghost in my own family. If you are listening to my story, please tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Sometimes knowing there are people in the world listening to me helps me understand I am not as alone as I felt in that house. Because in that moment, surrounded by people, I never felt so alone in my life. The food was served. Everyone sat at the big dining room table. I also went to sit down, but Sarah stopped me with a fake smile. 'William, there are a lot of people. Why don't you eat in the kitchen? That way you are more comfortable, which meant you don't fit here. You are not part of this.' I ate alone in the kitchen. I heard the laughter, the conversations, the noise of the dishes. I heard Michael telling jokes, the nephews screaming, Sarah serving dessert, and me sitting on a plastic chair by the sink, eating my cold plate, feeling that they had erased me, that I was no longer William Parker. I was no longer Michael's father. I was no longer Sam and Lily's grandfather. I was the old man who was in the way, the old man who smelled weird, the old man who was extra. I finished eating. I washed my plate in silence and went up to my room. Nobody noticed I left. Nobody. That night, lying in my bed, looking at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't keep begging for love, begging for space, begging for the right to exist. But I didn't know what to do either. I had nowhere to go. My savings were running out. My pension I gave completely to Michael. I was trapped in a house where they hated me but needed me to pay bills, trapped in a life that was no longer a life. And for the first time in many years, I thought about giving up, about letting myself die there, in that room, without making noise, without bothering, because that was how they wanted me to live, in silence, invisible, dead in life. The days started to look all the same. I woke up before dawn. when the house was still silent, because that was the only moment I could move without bothering. I got dressed in the dark, without turning on the light, to not waste electricity that later Sarah would charge me for with her look. I went down the stairs, stepping only on the edges of the steps, those parts that don't creak. I prepared my coffee using the exact amount of water I needed, not a drop more, because Sarah had also told me, "Gas is very expensive, William. Don't waste it." I lived measuring the water, measuring the space, measuring my breathing, trying to occupy as little as possible, to weigh as little as possible, to be as little as possible. Sarah had given me rules. She didn't say them all at once. She didn't sit down with me to explain them. She dropped them in casual comments, in phrases that sounded like suggestions, but were orders. William better not use the living room after 6. The kids do their homework there. William, don't open the refrigerator all the time. It wastes more electricity. William, when you shower, make it fast. The heater consumes a lot of gas. I nodded to everything. Of course, Sarah. Whatever you say, Sarah. I became a tenant in my own son's house, a tenant who paid rent with his full pension and still had no rights, only obligations, only rules to obey. The room they gave me measured 6 by 6 feet, a twin bed barely fit, an old nightstand and a narrow closet. The window faced a gray wall, the neighbor's house wall, so close that if I extended my arm I could touch it. No natural light entered, not even in the mornings. I lived in a cave, in a tomb. I had hung Mary's photo on the wall, next to the bed. Sometimes I spoke to her in a low voice, when I was sure no one was listening. "What do I do, love? What do I do?" But Mary didn't answer. She just looked at me from that photo, smiling, without knowing that I was dying little by little in that room that smelled of humidity and hopelessness. One afternoon, Sarah knocked on my door. She didn't wait for me to say, "Come in." She simply entered. She was carrying a cardboard box in her hands. "William, I need you to store some of your things here. We are going to use this room as storage, too." I looked at her without understanding. "Storage?" She nodded, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Yes, we have things that don't fit in the garage. It will just be a few boxes. They won't get in your way." And she started putting boxes in. Boxes with Christmas decorations, with the kids' old toys, with clothes they no longer used. My room was filling up. My space was shrinking. And I didn't say anything, because I no longer had the right to complain. The kids stopped touching me, literally. Sam passed by me in the hallway and stuck to the wall so as not to brush against me. Lily, when she saw me in the kitchen, turned around and went the other way. One day I tried to hug Lily. I just wanted to feel that I was still her grandfather, that I still mattered. I approached with open arms. "Come here, honey. Give me a hug." She stepped back. "No, Grandpa. It's just that I don't want to." Sarah appeared at that moment. "Lily, say hello to Grandpa." Lily waved at me, from afar, with a face of discomfort, and I felt something break inside me. My own grandchildren were disgusted by me. They saw me as something contagious, as something to stay away from. One afternoon I was in my room reading when I heard a soft knock on the door. "Come in," I said. It was Lily. She entered slowly, looking toward the hallway, as if making sure no one saw her. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I brought you a drawing." It was a drawing of the two of us, holding hands, with a sun and flowers. My eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, honey. It is beautiful." She smiled. She came closer. She was going to hug me. But then Sarah appeared at the door. "Lily, what are you doing here? Let Grandpa rest." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were hard. Lily looked at me with sadness. She left the drawing on the bed and ran out. Sarah followed her, and I stayed there, with that drawing in my hands, crying, because even my own granddaughter had to hide to show me affection. I started leaving the house as soon as the sun came up, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I couldn't stand being there. I walked around the neighborhood for hours, without direction. I watched people pass by, busy with their lives, with their jobs, with their families, and I envied even the man sweeping the street because he had a purpose. He was useful for something. I was useful for nothing. One day I sat on a bench in the square. There were pigeons pecking at the ground. A boy was throwing breadcrumbs at them. I stayed there, watching the boy, and I thought, that boy has more value than me, because he is feeding the pigeons. I'm just taking up space on a bench. I discovered the community library by chance. I was walking aimlessly, as always, when I saw an old building with a sign, Public Municipal Library. Open 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I went in. It smelled like old books, like wood, like silence. There were shelves full of books from floor to ceiling, worn wooden tables, uncomfortable but empty chairs. There were hardly any people. A couple of students, an older lady reading the newspaper, a young man with headphones. Nobody looked at me. Nobody judged me. Nobody wrinkled their nose at my smell. I picked a book at random. I sat at a table in the back and breathed for the first time in months. Here nobody kicked me out. Here nobody told me I was in the way. Here I could exist. I started going every day. I left Michael's house at 8 in the morning and didn't return until 6 in the evening. Sarah was happy. That's good that you go out, William. It does you good. And here in the house, we breathe better too. She meant it literally. We breathe better without you. I nodded. Yes, Sarah, it does me good. But the truth is, I didn't go to the library because it did me good. I went because it was the only place in the world where I didn't feel rejected. I read everything. Novels, biographies, essays, newspapers. I read to forget. I read not to think. I read not to feel that my life had become a slow wait for death. It was in that library where I met her. Helen. I didn't see her arrive. I was reading a Gabriel Garcia Marquez book, lost in the words, when I heard a soft voice beside me. That book is beautiful. Is it the first time you are reading it? I looked up. It was a woman of about 65 years, silver hair tied in an elegant bun, dressed in a wine-colored sweater and a silk scarf. She had incredible green eyes, full of intelligence and something I hadn't seen in a long time. Kindness. Yes, I told her. It is the first time. She smiled. You are going to love it. Marquez has a way of writing that traps you. She sat in the chair opposite me, and that's how it all started. Helen went to the library 3 times a week. She was a widow. Her husband, a renowned architect, had died 5 years ago of cancer. I took care of him until the end, she told me one afternoon, while we drank coffee in the small cafeteria of the library. And when he died, I was left in a huge house, full of memories and silence. Her children lived abroad, one in Spain, another in New York. They called her once a month, if that she said with a sad smile. They are busy with their lives. And I stayed here trying to fill the days. We were so alike, it was scary. 2 lonely people, 2 forgotten people, 2 people who still breathed but no longer lived. We started meeting often. I arrived at the library and looked for her silver hair. She did the same. When we saw each other, we smiled, we sat together, we talked about books, about music, about the life we had lived, about the children who had abandoned us. Helen never asked me why I spent so many hours in the library, and I never told her that in my son's house they treated me like garbage. But I think she knew, because one day, after 2 months of seeing each other almost daily, she told me something that left me speechless. William, you don't deserve to be sad. You deserve to be heard, valued, loved, and for the first time in years, someone saw me. Someone recognized me. Someone told me I was still worth something. And I cried, right there, in that library. I cried like a child. The night of the scream arrived without warning, or maybe it did warn and I didn't want to see it. That day had been especially good. I spent the whole afternoon with Helen in the library. We had read poetry together, Neruda. She read aloud, and I listened with my eyes closed. letting myself be carried away by her voice. Then we went to the cafeteria and drank hot chocolate. She told me about her youth in Buenos Aires, about when she met her husband, about the trips they took together through Europe. I told her about Mary, about how we met at a town dance, about how it took me 3 months to dare to ask her to be my girlfriend. We laughed. We looked into each other's eyes, and something happened between us, something I didn't dare name, but that I felt stronger every time. I returned to Michael's house at 7 in the evening, later than usual, when I opened the door. I felt the tension immediately. Michael was in the living room standing with his arms crossed. Sarah was in the kitchen, making noise with the pots. That intentional noise she makes when she is angry. The kids weren't there. "Good evening," I said. Nobody answered. Michael looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him. Rage. Pure rage. "Where were you?" His voice was low, but it was trembling. "At the library," I answered. "Reading." Sarah appeared at the kitchen door. "I prepared dinner for you 3 hours ago, William." 3 hours. And you didn't even notify that you would arrive late. I was going to apologize. But Michael interrupted me. "Sit down. We have to talk." "Now." I sat on the sofa. Michael remained standing, like a judge in front of a defendant. Sarah sat on the arm of the armchair, with her arms still crossed, looking at me as if I were an irresponsible teenager. And in that moment, I understood that this was not about dinner. This was about everything. About months of accumulated frustration. About the discomfort of having me in their house. About the obligation to care for a father they no longer wanted. Michael started speaking, and his voice was like ice. "Dad, this cannot go on like this. You can't be here all day doing nothing, wasting our electricity, our water, our food, and then go for a walk as if you were on vacation. That isn't fair," I tried to explain. "Son, I go out so I don't get in the way. So you have your space. I thought I was doing you a favor." Sarah let out a dry laugh. "A favor, William, a favor would be if you helped economically for real. That you contributed more than those miserable $1,000 you give us every month." Every word was a slap. Those $1,000 were my entire pension. It was everything I had, and she called them miserable. Michael nodded. "Mom is right, Dad. $1,000 doesn't cover even the electricity and water, much less the food. Do you know how much you spend just on your blood pressure medicines? Almost $300 a month, and we pay it." I didn't know that. They had never told me how much my medicines cost. Sarah simply gave them to me, and I took them, thinking my pension covered them. I felt tiny on that sofa. I felt like I was shrinking, that I was becoming smaller and smaller with every word they said. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "I didn't know. I can stop the medicines." "Stop the medicines." Michael raised his voice. "And what do you want? To have a heart attack like Mom?" "No, Dad. What you have to do is get a job, look for something, whatever. There are jobs for people your age. Security in supermarkets, gardening, cleaning. It doesn't matter what, but you have to contribute more. Because we cannot go on like this. Work, at my 71 years, with high blood pressure, with knees that creak every time I climb the stairs. They wanted me to get a job." Sarah got up and went to the kitchen. She came back with a paper. She put it on the coffee table, in front of me. "Look, William, I did the math. This is what you spend a month living here. Water, electricity, gas, food, medicines, internet you use in your room to watch your news. Everything adds up to $2,500. You contribute $1,000. We are missing $1,500 every month. $1,500. In a year, it's almost $18,000. Do you understand? I looked at the paper. It was full of numbers, of additions, of subtractions. My life reduced to a spreadsheet, to an economic loss. I didn't know I spent so much. I said with a broken voice, "I can eat less. I can." "It's not about eating less," Michael interrupted me. "It's about you contributing what you spend, about you not being a burden." Burden. That word again. My son called me A burden. Me. Who carried him on my shoulders when he was 3 and didn't want to walk? Me. Who worked double shifts in the factory to pay for his school? Me. Who carried his mother's casket when she died, because he couldn't from crying so much. Now I was the burden. Son, I told him. And my voice sounded like it came from very far away. I worked 40 years. I broke my back in that factory. I don't have more savings because I gave everything to you. Everything. And now you ask me at my age. 71 years is not that old, Michael yelled at me. For the first time in the whole conversation, he yelled, Old Mr. Jenkins, the neighbor on the corner, he is 75 and works as a security guard. You can do the same. Old Mr. Jenkins, the neighbor who could barely walk, who fell asleep in his chair outside the supermarket, who earned a misery, and who everyone knew worked only because his family had abandoned him. Michael was comparing me to old Mr. Jenkins. He was telling me that was what I should do. An old man working until I died because my family didn't want to take care of me. I can't believe you are telling me this, I whispered. Sarah leaned toward me. William, let's be realistic. We cannot support you forever. We have our plans. We want to remodel the kitchen, travel, save for the kids' college. And if you continue here without contributing anything more than $1,000, we are not going to be able to do any of that. Then Michael said what he had come to say from the beginning. He leaned toward me, brought his face close to mine, looked me in the eye with a hardness I had never seen, and pronounced the words that destroyed me. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, get a job. He said it slowly, word for word, so it would be very clear to me, so it would sink deep. Nursing home. My son was threatening to put me in a nursing home. Those places where people leave their parents to forget about them, where it smells of urine and sadness, where old people sit in wheelchairs looking at nothing, waiting for a visit that never arrives. That was my future if I didn't obey, if I didn't get a job, if I didn't stop being a burden. Something inside me turned off in that moment. It wasn't rage, it wasn't sadness. It was worse, it was resignation. It was understanding that the son I had raised, the boy who promised to take care of me always, the young man who cried on my shoulder when his girlfriend left him, that son no longer existed. In front of me was a stranger, a man who saw me as a financial problem, as an obstacle to his plans to remodel the kitchen and travel to Hawaii, a man who had calculated how much my existence cost him, and had decided that it was too much. I got up from the sofa without saying a word. Sarah asked me, Are you going to look for a job? Then I didn't answer her. I went up the stairs slowly, feeling every step like a mountain, and entered my room. I closed the door. I sat on the bed. And I stayed there looking at the wall for I don't know how long. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. I heard Michael and Sarah downstairs, speaking in low voices, probably discussing if they had been too hard on me, but I didn't care, because in that silence, in that loneliness of my room that smelled of damp and defeat, I made a decision. I wasn't going to look for a job. I wasn't going to keep begging for a place in this house. I wasn't going to wait for them to put me in a nursing home. I was leaving. I didn't know where, but I was leaving. I took my suitcase out of the closet, the same one I arrived with 8 months ago, when I still had hope. I opened it on the bed and started packing. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were trembling with freedom. I didn't sleep that night, not a minute. I stayed sitting on the bed, with the suitcase open in front of me, looking at it, without finishing packing. Every time I grabbed a shirt, a photo, a book, my hands shook so much I had to drop it. Where was I going to go? I had nowhere to go. The savings I had left from the sale of my house barely covered 2 months. Rent in some miserable room. And then, what? End up on the street. End up begging on a corner. Michael's threat echoed in my head. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, get a job. Nursing home. Job. 2 words that sounded like death sentences. I closed the suitcase without finishing packing, and waited for dawn. I went down at 7 in the morning. My legs barely held me. I hadn't eaten anything since noon the day before. I hadn't slept. I felt like a ghost walking through that house that wasn't mine anymore. That was never mine. Michael was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, reading something on his phone. When he saw me enter, he looked up. There was a second of discomfort on his face. Just a second. Then he returned to his normal expression, that mask of indifference he used with me. "Good morning, Dad," he said. But it wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement that I still existed. Nothing more. I poured myself water in a glass. I didn't have the stomach for coffee. My hands shook as I turned on the faucet. Sarah appeared in her floral robe, her hair still messy. Yawning, she looked at me sideways. "Are you going out to look for a job already?" she asked with a tone that tried to sound casual. But that distilled hope. Hope that I would obey, that I would submit, that I would give in. I left the glass in the sink. "I'm going out," I said with a dull voice. To resolve this, I didn't say more. I didn't owe them explanations. Michael nodded as if he had won. "Seems good to me, Dad. It is the right thing." The right thing. As if kicking me out to look for a job at 71, with high blood pressure, with destroyed knees, was the right thing. As if treating me like garbage was the right thing. I didn't answer. I just went to my room, grabbed my jacket, and walked out of that house. I didn't know where I was going. My feet walked alone down the street, without direction, without aim. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. There was fog. It was cold. I walked through the neighborhood I already knew by heart. I passed in front of old Mr. Jenkins' store, who was sweeping the entrance with his old broom, hunched over, coughing. Michael wanted me to be like him, an old man working until death. I kept walking. I passed in front of the park, where I used to play with Michael when he was a boy. The benches were empty, the swings motionless. Everything seemed dead, like me. I walked for hours, without thinking, without feeling, just putting one foot in front of the other because I didn't know what else to do. And when I looked up, I was in front of the library. My refuge, the only place where I could still breathe. I went in. It smelled like books, like wood, like silence. But this time, that smell didn't comfort me. I sat at my usual table, in the back, and I stayed there looking at the wall, with my hands on the table, empty. I didn't grab any book. I didn't even have the strength to read. I just sat there, feeling how my body weighed like lead, how my head was spinning, how everything inside me was turning off. Then I heard her voice. "William." I turned around. Helen was there, standing next to my table, with a book in her hands, but she wasn't looking at the book. She was looking at me, and in her eyes I saw something that broke me. Concern, real concern. "What happened?" she asked in a low voice, almost a whisper, and I couldn't take it anymore. I collapsed. I didn't cry immediately. First, I tried to speak. I tried to tell her I was fine, that I was just tired, that nothing was wrong, but my voice broke at the first word, and then the tears came. Tears that I had been holding back since the night before, since months ago, since years ago. I cried there, in that library, with Helen standing in front of me, not caring who saw me. I cried like I hadn't cried since Mary died. Helen left her book on the table, took the chair opposite me, sat down and grabbed my hands. "William, tell me, please. What did they do to you?" And I, between sobs, between broken breaths, I told her everything. Everything. I told her about Michael's scream, about the word nursing home thrown like a threat, about Sarah and her list of expenses, about her cold calculations, about the $300 in medicines that I supposedly spent. I told her that they had told me I was a burden, that I was in the way, that my $1,000 were useless. I told her they wanted me to look for work, that at 71 years old they demanded I go out to the street to look for anything because they wanted to remodel the kitchen and travel to Hawaii. I told her I had packed my suitcase, but I had nowhere to go, that I was trapped, that I felt like a cornered animal waiting for the final blow. Helen didn't interrupt me. She just squeezed my hands tighter, and when I finished speaking, when I had no words left, I saw that she was crying too. "I can't believe your own son would do this to you," Helen said, her voice trembling with rage and sadness. "I can't believe it, William. You are a good man, a dignified man. You deserve respect. You deserve love. You deserve a place where they value you." I shook my head. "I don't know what I deserve anymore, Helen. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am a burden. Maybe, at my age, I am good for nothing." Helen let go of my hands. She grabbed my face. She forced me to look her in the eyes. "Don't say that. Never say that again. You have value. You matter. And if your son doesn't see it, then he is the one who is worth nothing. Not you." Her words pierced me, because they were the words I needed to hear, the words no one had said to me in years. We stayed there, at that table, crying together, holding hands, in the middle of an almost empty library. An old woman reading the newspaper looked at us strangely, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I didn't care what others thought. Only that moment mattered, that connection, that shared pain. Helen passed me a cloth handkerchief she took from her purse. I dried my tears. She dried hers. "I'm sorry," I told her. "I didn't want to break down like this. I didn't want to—" "Don't apologize," she interrupted me. "Don't apologize for feeling, for being human, for being broken. We are all broken, William. The difference is that some of us hide it better than others." She stared at me. "But you don't have to hide it with me. With me, you can be yourself. You can break. You can cry. You can exist." We stayed talking for hours. I told her more things, about Mary, about how I woke up at night looking for her in bed, about Michael when he was a boy, about the promises he made me and forgot, about the grandchildren who no longer hug me, about the meals I eat alone in the kitchen while the family laughs in the dining room. Helen also told me things. She told me about her children who abandoned her, who only call her when they need money, about her husband who died in her arms after 2 years of agony, about the huge house where she lives alone, full of empty rooms, of memories that hurt. Sometimes she told me I feel like I already died, but my body hasn't realized it yet. I keep breathing, but I don't live. I just exist. I understood exactly what she was saying, because I also just existed. I had stopped living months ago. When the library clock struck 5 in the afternoon, Helen told me something that left me speechless. "William, you cannot go back to that house. Not today. Not like this." I shook my head. "I have nowhere else to go, Helen." She looked at me with an intensity that scared me and comforted me at the same time. "Yes, you do. You have me." She got up from the chair, put her things in her purse, and extended her hand to me. "Come. Let's go have coffee at a quiet place, and we are going to talk for real, about what comes next, about what we can do." I grabbed her hand, and, for the first time in days, I felt that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out. We left the library together, and in that moment, without knowing it, my life was about to change forever. We went to a small cafe, one of those old ones, with wooden tables and chairs that creak. Helen ordered 2 lattes and sweetbread. I wasn't hungry, but she insisted. "You have to eat something, William. You look pale." We ate in silence for the first few minutes. I looked at my cup, stirring the coffee without drinking it, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Helen observed me, and then, when we finished, she spoke. "William, I need to tell you something. Something I haven't told you because I didn't want you to view me differently. But I think it is time you know who I really am." I looked up. "I know who Helen is. A good woman, intelligent, kind." She smiled sadly. "I am more than that, or less, depending on how you see it. Helen Stewart was not just any widow. Her husband, Charles Stewart, had been one of the most renowned architects in the city. He designed buildings that are still standing, that appear in architecture magazines, that people point to with pride. When Charles died 5 years ago, he left Helen a fortune, a huge house in Oakwood, the most expensive neighborhood in the city, 2 cars, a Mercedes, and a BMW, investments, properties, bank accounts with numbers I couldn't even imagine. I am not telling you this to brag, Helen told me with a low voice. I am telling you this because you need to understand that I don't need money. I don't need anyone to support me. What I need is company. What I need is someone who sees me as a person, not as a rich widow to get something out of. I stayed quiet, processing what she was telling me. Helen, the woman with whom I had drunk coffee for months, with whom I had read poetry, with whom I had shared my sadness, was a millionaire. She lived in a mansion. She had more money than I had seen in my entire life. And yet she was there, sitting in front of me, crying for my problems as if they were hers. Why are you telling me this now? I asked her. She took my hand across the table. Because I need you to understand that what I am going to propose is not charity. It is not pity. It is something I need as much as you. Maybe more. My heart started beating faster. What are you going to propose? Helen took a deep breath, and then she said it. Come live with me, William. She said it like that, without beating around the bush, looking me in the eyes. I have a 4-bedroom house. I live alone. There is space to spare. There is silence to spare. There is loneliness to spare. And I need someone. I need conversation. I need laughter. I need to wake up and know that there is someone else breathing in that house. And you need a place where they value you, where you don't have to count every dollar you spend, where you can live with dignity, where you can be you. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Helen, I can't. I can't accept that. It would be taking advantage of you. It would be... She squeezed my hand harder. Taking advantage, William? I've been alone in that house for 5 years. 5 years talking to the walls. You are saving me as much as I am saving you. Helen, I started to say, but she interrupted me. William, I know what you are going to say, that you need to think about it, that it is too soon. You already told me that 3 weeks ago. I froze. It was true. 3 weeks ago, Helen had hinted the same thing to me. She had told me, my house is big, William. You are always welcome. And I, ashamed, had told her no, that I couldn't accept that. What would people think that we barely knew each other? All excuses. Because deep down, I was afraid. Afraid of being a burden to another person. Afraid of repeating what happened with Michael. But now, sitting in front of her, homeless, familyless, with nothing, I understood that this time I couldn't say no. Not because I didn't have options, but because this time I wanted to say yes. I started crying again, silent tears rolling down my cheeks and falling onto the table. Helen was crying too. It is not charity, she repeated. It is companionship. It is friendship. It is. It is what we need. We are both alone. We were both abandoned by our children. We both still have life ahead of us. But we are wasting it in places where they don't want us. Why don't we live it together in a place where we do want each other? The way she said those last words pierced me. We want each other. But a doubt was eating me up inside, and I had to say it. Helen, I told her, looking her in the eyes, what will people think? Are they going to think I am with you for your money? Are they going to say I am an opportunist? An old man who got himself a rich widow? Helen squeezed my hand tightly. And do you care what people think? I hesitated. I care what you think. She smiled with tenderness. I think that if someone believes you are with me for money, it is because they have never felt true loneliness. Because money doesn't fill empty nights, William. It doesn't fill conversations. It doesn't fill the heart. You give me something money could never buy. You make me feel alive again. I felt a huge weight lift from my chest. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for seeing me like that. It was true. In those months at the library, without realizing it, we had fallen in love, not with the passion of youth, but with something deeper, more real, with the need of two broken souls who recognize themselves in each other's pain. "Are you sure?" I asked her, with a trembling voice. "Are you completely sure about this, Helen? Because I have nothing to offer you. I don't have money. I don't have properties. I have nothing but my $1,000 pension and a half-packed suitcase." Helen smiled through tears. "You have something that is worth more than all that. You have intelligent conversation. You have kindness. You have a way of looking at me that makes me feel that I am still a woman, not just a widow. You have a laugh I like to listen to. You have stories I like to hear. And you have a heart that, although broken, keeps beating. That is what you offer me, and for me, it is everything." I got up from the table, walked around to her chair, and hugged her, right there, in the middle of that cafe, without caring who saw us. We stayed hugging for a long while. The other customers looked at us with curiosity, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt that someone was holding me, that someone was catching me before I fell. "I accept," I whispered in her ear. "I accept Helen, and thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for saving me." She separated from me, looked at me with those green eyes full of tears and hope, and told me, "Don't thank me. Thank us both, because this is for both of us." We paid for the coffee. We went out to the street. The sun was already going down. Helen offered to take me in her car to Michael's house. "So you can pick up your things," she said. I hesitated. "Today." "Now," she nodded. "Today. Now. Before you regret it. Before they convince you to stay. You already made your decision, William. Now it's time to live it." I got into Helen's Mercedes. It was the first time I entered her car. It smelled of leather, of expensive perfume, of a life I had never had. The seats were soft. The dashboard shone. There was classical music playing softly on the stereo. Helen drove with confidence, with elegance, like someone who has driven cars like this all her life. I was in the passenger seat, looking out the window, watching the streets pass by, feeling how my life was taking a turn I never imagined. "Are you afraid?" Helen asked me without taking her eyes off the road. "Yes," I admitted. "A lot." She nodded. "Me too. But sometimes fear's good. It means we are alive, that we are feeling, that we are taking risks." She was right. It had been years since I felt fear, because it had been years since I risked anything, since I lived anything. We arrived at Michael's house 20 minutes later. Helen parked in front of the door. She turned off the engine, looked at me. "Do you want me to go in with you?" I shook my head. "No, I have to do this alone." She understood. "I'm going to wait for you here. Take the time you need. But William, don't let yourself be convinced. Don't let yourself be manipulated. You already decided. Grab your things and come out. You don't owe them explanations. You don't owe them anything." I nodded. I opened the car door. I put one foot on the street, and before getting out, I turned to Helen. "This is real, right? It isn't a dream. I'm not going to wake up and realize it was all my imagination." She smiled. "It is real, William, as real as the fact that I need you too. Now go, and come back to me." I got out of the car, took a deep breath, and entered Michael's house for the last time. Inside, everything was silent. I went up the stairs without making noise, entered my room, closed the door, and finished packing what I had left half done the night before. My clothes, my books, Mary's photo, the medal from my father that I inherited when he died, important documents, my birth certificate, my ID, my pension papers, everything fit in one suitcase. My whole life fit in one suitcase. When I finished, I sat on the bed for a moment, looked at that room for the last time. That 6x6 room where I had slept 8 months feeling I didn't belong, and I felt relief. Relief, knowing I was never coming back. I grabbed the suitcase, opened the door, and ran into Michael standing in the hallway, looking at me with a face of surprise. "What are you doing?" Dad. His voice sounded confused. I didn't answer. I just walked toward the stairs. He followed me. Dad, I am talking to you. Where are you going with that suitcase? I went down the stairs. Sarah appeared from the kitchen. William, what is happening? Did you get a job? I kept walking toward the door. They followed me. More and more confused, more and more alarmed. Dad answered me. What is happening? I reached the door, opened it, and then Michael saw the Mercedes parked outside. He saw Helen sitting at the wheel, waiting for me. His face changed, from confusion to shock. Who is she? I went out without answering. I walked toward the car. I heard Sarah scream. William, you can't leave like this. Explain to us what is happening. But I didn't owe them explanations anymore. I didn't owe them anything anymore? I opened the back door, put my suitcase in, got into the passenger seat. I looked at Helen. Let's go. She started the engine, and we left, leaving them there, at the door, with their mouths open, watching how their problem resolved itself, but not how they expected. We drove in silence for the first few minutes. I looked in the side mirror, watching how Michael's house became smaller and smaller until it disappeared. My heart was beating so hard I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. Helen drove calmly, with one hand on the wheel and the other extended toward me, waiting. I grabbed her hand and breathed. For the first time in months, I breathed for real. Are you okay? She asked me without taking her eyes off the road. I nodded, although I wasn't sure if I was okay. I was in shock. I was scared. I was free. Yes, I told her. I think so. She squeezed my hand. You did well, William. You were brave. And now your new life begins. My new life. It sounded impossible. But there I was, sitting in that Mercedes, heading to a house I didn't know, with a woman who had saved me. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. We arrived at Oakwood half an hour later. I had heard of that neighborhood. Everyone knew it. It was where the people with money lived. Huge houses, clean streets, perfect gardens. When Helen entered the main avenue, I stayed looking out the window like a child. Leafy trees on both sides, wrought iron gates, new cars parked in driveways. Helen turned onto a private street and stopped in front of a 2-story house. Beige color, with huge windows and a garden that seemed taken from a magazine. This is my house, she said simply, as if it were something normal. I froze. You live here, she smiled. We live here. That word, we live. It still hadn't sunk in that this was real. Helen opened the electric gate with a remote control. We entered. She parked the Mercedes in the garage, next to the black BMW that shone like a mirror. I got out of the car, like in a trance. She took my suitcase from the back. Come, William. I am going to show you your room. We walked toward the entrance. Helen unlocked the door. And when I entered, I almost fell. The interior was more impressive than the exterior. Marble floors, stairs with carved wooden railings, paintings on the walls, elegant furniture, light entering from everywhere. It is very big. It was the only thing I could say. Helen laughed. Too big for one person. That is why I am glad you are here. She took me to the second floor, opened a door. This is your room. I entered. It was the size of the entire ground floor of the house where I lived with Mary. King-size bed, huge closet, private bathroom, windows with a view of the garden. I couldn't speak. I could only look. Meanwhile, said Helen, leaving my suitcase on the floor, in your son's house, things are happening. She was right, although I wasn't there. I could imagine it. Michael and Sarah entered the house after watching us leave. They closed the door. They stood in the living room processing what had just happened. Who was that woman? Sarah asked with a high-pitched voice. Michael didn't answer. He was in shock. His father, the useless old man who was in the way, the one who smelled weird, the one who was good for nothing, had just left in a Mercedes with an elegant rich woman who looked at him with affection. I don't know, Michael murmured. I have no idea. Sarah went to the window, looked toward the empty street. Do you think he will come back? Michael sat on the sofa with his head in his hands. I don't know. I don't know. But deep down, he knew he wasn't coming back, and that terrified him. 2 days passed. 2 days in which Michael called my cell phone 15 times. I didn't answer any calls. He left voicemails. The first sounded annoyed. Dad, what are you doing? Answer me. We have to talk. The second sounded worried. Dad, please. Tell me you're okay. At least let me know where you are. The third sounded desperate. Dad, forgive me. I know I was hard on you. But you can't leave like this. Come back home. Let's talk. Home. What an ironic word. That was never my home. I listened to the messages with Helen by my side. She asked me, "Are you going to answer him?" I shook my head. Not yet. Let him feel what I felt. Let him wonder where I am. Let him suffer the uncertainty a little. Helen nodded. Good. Let him learn. On the third day, I made a decision. I'm going back, I told Helen during breakfast. She looked up from her coffee. Back to stay with them. No, I answered quickly. Back to look for the last things I left, my bank documents. Some photos that are in the closet, small but important things. Helen nodded. Do you want me to accompany you? I thought a moment. Then I smiled. Yes, I want you to accompany me. I want them to see who you are. I want them to understand that I didn't leave with just anyone, that I left with a woman who is worth more than all of them together. Helen smiled too. Then let's go. But this time, William. You are going to speak. You are not going to leave in silence anymore. You are going to tell them what they need to hear. She was right. It was time to close that chapter, but close it well, with dignity, with truth. We arrived at Michael's house at 3 p.m. Helen parked in the same spot as the previous time, turned off the engine, looked at me. Ready? I nodded. We got out of the car, walked together toward the door. I rang the doorbell. We waited. I heard hurried steps inside. The door opened. Michael appeared disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, his face lit up with relief. Dad, thank God. I thought that... But he fell silent when he saw Helen by my side. His gaze went from me to her, from her to me. I came for my last things, I said with a firm voice, and then we are leaving. Forever. Sarah appeared behind Michael. Her face went from surprise to indignation. Forever, William. You can't be serious. I didn't answer. I simply entered. Went up the stairs with Helen behind me. Michael and Sarah followed us like desperate shadows. Dad, wait. We have to talk. I entered the room that had been my prison for 8 months. Opened the closet. Took out the box where I kept my documents. Old photos, letters from Mary, bank papers. Helen helped me in silence, with a calm that contrasted with Michael and Sarah's hysteria. Dad, please. Who is this woman? What is happening? I turned toward them and spoke, with a quiet but firm voice. This woman is Helen Stewart, and she is someone who sees me as a person, as a man, as a human being who deserves respect, something you forgot a long time ago. Sarah took a step forward. William, we respect you. We only wanted you to contribute more to the house. I let out a bitter laugh. Respect. You call, telling me I smell old respect, making me eat in the kitchen when guests come, threatening me with a nursing home. Michael tried to justify himself. Dad, I was angry. I didn't mean it. You know how I am when I am stressed. I stared at him. You said it. And even if you hadn't said it, you thought it. And that is worse. Sarah crossed her arms. And what are you going to go live with a stranger, someone you just met? That is crazy, William. Helen spoke then with a soft voice but full of authority. I am not a stranger. William and I have known each other for 5 months. We have spent entire afternoons talking, getting to know each other, taking care of each other, something you never did. Sarah looked her up and down with contempt. And who are you to come and judge us? Helen didn't flinch. I am the person who saw his value when you only saw his cost. That sentence fell like a bomb. Michael and Sarah were left, speechless. I finished packing the box. Helen carried it. We went down the stairs. They followed us, desperate, screaming, "Dad, you can't do this. We are your family." I stopped at the door, turned for the last time, and said what I had to say. Family is who takes care of you, not who counts you. Family is who values you, not who charges you. Family is who loves you, not who tolerates you. And you stopped being my family the day you treated me like garbage. Sarah tried one last defense. We gave you a roof, William. We gave you food. I smiled with sadness. And I gave you 50 years of fatherhood. I gave you sacrifices you never valued. I gave you everything I had. And in exchange, you gave me a 6x6 room and a list of expenses. You owe me nothing. But I don't owe you anything anymore either. I went out. Helen closed the door behind us. We left them there, screaming, crying, trying to open the door that we had already closed forever. We got into the Mercedes. Helen started it. I looked at the house for the last time through the side mirror. I saw Michael and Sarah run out to the street, screaming my name, but their voices got lost in the distance. Helen took my hand. "Are you okay?" I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, it was true. I was okay. I wasn't happy yet, but I was at peace. I had closed a door that was suffocating me, and I had opened a window through which fresh air entered. Light, hope. "Let's go home," I said, and Helen smiled, because we both knew that when I said home, I was no longer referring to Michael's house. I was referring to our house, to the place where I was welcome, to the place where I mattered, to the place where finally I could live again. 3 months have passed since I left Michael's house. 3 months living with Helen in Oakwood, and I swear that every morning I still wake up not believing this is real. I wake up in a huge bed with soft sheets, with light entering through large windows. I get up without having to measure my steps, without having to tiptoe so as not to disturb. I go down to the kitchen, and Helen is already there preparing coffee, smiling when she sees me enter. "Good morning, William," and she says it with affection, with genuine affection, not with the obligation of someone who has to say hello. We have breakfast together, talking about everything and nothing, about the books we are reading, about the news, about the day's plans. We have breakfast without rushing, without tension, without feeling that I am in the way, and every breakfast is a miracle. Helen introduced me to her friends, people her age, widows and widowers, retired professionals, cultured people who received me without judging me. "This is William," Helen said at a dinner she organized at the house. "He is a writer, an inveterate reader, and the most interesting person I have known in years." Writer. No one had ever called me that. But it is true that I write. I started writing my memoirs, the story of my life, encouraged by Helen. "You have so much to tell," she told me. "Don't let it get lost." And there I am, every afternoon, in the house study, in front of a computer Helen bought me, writing about Mary, about Michael when he was a boy, about the factory, about everything. And I feel that my life, finally, has meaning again. Michael kept calling me during the first month, every day, sometimes, twice a day. I didn't answer. Helen told me, "When you are ready, answer, but only when you are ready." After a month and a half, finally, I answered. His voice sounded small, broken. "Dad, yes. Thanks for answering." We talked, or rather, he spoke. He asked for forgiveness. He told me he realized how badly he treated me, that Sarah was also regretful, that the kids asked about me. I listened in silence, and when he finished, I told him, "I accept your apology, Michael, but I am not coming back. I found a place where I am happy, where they value me, where I can be me." He cried. "At least? Can I visit you?" I thought a moment. "Someday, when I am ready. But not now." And I hung up. I felt peace. I didn't feel guilt, only peace. But here comes the interesting part. What Michael and Sarah didn't tell me in that call, what I found out later by pure chance. It turns out my blood pressure medicines never cost $300 a month. I went to the pharmacy here in Oakwood to buy my treatment. The pharmacist charged me $40. 40. Are you sure? I asked him. Completely. It is the generic. But it works the same as the brand. I went back home in shock. I told Helen. She was as indignant as I was. They lied to you, William. They inflated the expenses to make you feel guilty. And it worked. For months, I believed I was an economic burden, that my medicines were extremely expensive, that I cost them a fortune. All lies. Lies to manipulate me, to control me, to justify their mistreatment. And then I understood something else. Something that fell on me like a bucket of cold water. Michael and Sarah knew about my $100,000 in the bank. The $100,000 from the sale of my house. And they were waiting for me to die to inherit them. That is why they wanted me in their house, not for love, for inheritance, for those $100,000 that, added to the $100,000 I already gave them, completed the total sale of the house I built with my hands, with my sweat. With 42 years of marriage with Mary, they wanted me close, but not alive. They wanted me dying slowly, cooperating with my pension, and then, when I closed my eyes forever, collect what they considered belonged to them. And now that I left, now that those 100,000 are going to stay with me until I decide what to do with them, Michael must be desperate, because he lost two things: his monthly pension of $1,000 and his inheritance of $100,000. And that, more than my love, is what really hurts him. And there is more. It turns out my $1,000 pension, the one Sarah called miserable, wasn't so miserable after all, because when I stopped depositing it, Michael felt the blow. I found out from a distant cousin who lives in the same neighborhood as him. She called me one day. William, do you know Michael canceled the trip to Hawaii? I was surprised. Seriously? Yes. And Sarah is furious. She says that since you left, the money isn't enough, that your $1,000 did make a difference. I laughed. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. So the miserable $1,000 were useful. They were enough for something. But they only realized it when they lost them, when they no longer had my money, when they no longer had me. Helen and I have become inseparable. We travel together. We went to the beach last month. We sat on the sand, looked at the sunset, holding hands. Are you happy, William? She asked me. I looked at her. I saw her silver hair moving with the wind. I saw her green eyes shining with the sunlight. I saw the woman who saved me. Yes, I told her. Happier than I have been in years. She rested her head on my shoulder. Me too. And we stayed like that, watching the sun go into the sea, knowing we had found something many search for all their lives and never find. Peace, company, love in old age, love without urgency, without unbridled passions, but deep, real, true. People in the neighborhood see us and smile. The couple of Oakwood, they call us. We go out to walk every morning, Helen on my arm, me on hers, supporting each other. We still go to the library, but now together, in her Mercedes, without having to hide, without having to escape from houses where they don't want us. We go because we like it, because we want to, not because we need refuge. One day, in the library, we met old Mr. Jenkins, Michael's neighbor, the 75-year-old security guard. He recognized me. Mr. Parker, how are you? I introduced him to Helen. This is my partner. He smiled with sadness. What luck yours, I am still working. My children don't speak to me. I gave him my number. Call me Mr. Jenkins. To have a coffee, to chat. No one should be alone. Helen squeezed my arm with pride. I learned something in these 3 months. I learned that old age is not the end. It is just another stage. A stage that can be beautiful if you live it with the right people. I learned that respect is not begged for. It is earned. And if someone doesn't respect you, they don't deserve your presence. I learned that family is not always blood. Sometimes it is the person who finds you in a library and tells you, you deserve to be heard. I learned that it's never too late to start over. At 71, I started a new life, and it is the best life I have had. Because it is a chosen life, not imposed, not tolerated. Chosen. 2 weeks ago. Michael came to visit me. Helen opened the door. Let him in. He froze when he saw the house, the stairs, the paintings, the size. I went down. Hello, son. He had red eyes, as if he had cried on the way. Dad. I came to apologize for real, not over the phone, in person. We sat in the living room. Helen brought us coffee and retired discreetly. Michael looked around. You live better than me, he said with a broken voice. It is not about living better, I answered. It is about living with dignity, with respect, with love. He cried, I failed you, Dad. I failed you horribly. I nodded. Yes, you failed me. But I also failed you. I spoiled you. I gave you everything without teaching you the value of anything. And now we both pay the consequences. Michael left an hour later. Before leaving, he hugged me. Do you forgive me? I hugged him too. I forgive you, son. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, nor going back to how it was before. It means letting go of the grudge. And I already did that. He nodded. Can I come visit you again? I smiled. Yes, but with one condition, that you come because you want to see me, not because you feel obligated, and bring the kids. I want to see my grandchildren. He left. When Michael left, I sat on the sofa, exhausted. Helen came back to the living room, sat next to me, took my hand. Did you really forgive him? She asked me. I sighed. I forgave him because I needed to forgive him. For me, for my peace. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting Helen. The wound is still there, every time I see him. I remember the scream. I remember the word nursing home. I remember the nights I cried in that 6x6 room. And it hurts. It still hurts. Helen nodded. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, William. It only frees you from carrying it as revenge. She was right. I had forgiven. But the relationship with Michael would never be the same. I would never trust him blindly again. I would never hand him my life again. I forgave him. But the trust, that died the day of the scream, and I don't know if it will ever resurrect. How do you feel? I sighed. Relieved. I closed the circle. I forgave him. But I also forgave myself for having allowed them to treat me like that for so long. Helen kissed my forehead. You are a wise man, William Parker. And I. For the first time in my life, I felt wise. I felt complete. Today. While I write this, while I remember everything I went through, everything I suffered, everything I lost, and everything I gained, I understand a fundamental truth. The best revenge is not hate. It is not grudge. It is not hurting those who hurt you. The best revenge is being happy. It is getting up every day knowing you chose your life. It is having breakfast with someone who looks at you with affection. It is sleeping in peace. It is waking up without fear. It is living with dignity. Michael and Sarah took 8 months of my life. 8 months of humiliation, of pain, of feeling like garbage. But I took their peace of mind because now, every time they see me happy, every time they see I did well without them, they understand what they lost. They didn't lose a useless old nuisance. They lost a father, a good man, someone who loved them until he couldn't anymore. And that loss, they are going to carry that all their life. And you, who are listening to me until the end, let me ask you something. Did they ever make you feel like you were extra? Did they ever tell you that you were a burden? Did you stay silent, or did you have the courage to leave? Tell me in the comments. Because your story also matters. Because you are not alone. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something, leave me a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, stories are not just to entertain. They are to remind us that we deserve dignity, that we deserve respect, that we deserve love. And that never. It is never too late to start over. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for reaching the end. See you in the next story.